Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're tackling Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. We've had a lot of requests to cover this one. Folks really want to know how to stay hopeful in tough times, and this book, well, it digs deep into that.
It's pretty amazing how Frankl uses his experiences in, of all places, a Nazi concentration camp during World War II to explore these big questions.
Yeah, we're talking about Auschwitz here. The first part of the book is him recounting life in the camp.
Yeah.
It's intense, but it's the foundation for his idea of logotherapy. But to even begin to wrap our heads around logotherapy, we need to understand the world it came from.
For sure. Let's set the stage. We're talking about the Holocaust, the systematic, extermination of Jews and other minorities. Frankl doesn't sugarcoat anything. He lays bare the brutality of the camps, the constant threat of death, the fight just to survive.
And, Frankl, being a psychiatrist, he brings this whole other layer of insight.
Yeah.
He was observing how the camps affected people psychologically, himself included.
He actually identified different stages the prisoners went through as they tried to cope with this trauma. First, there's shock, that initial hit. Imagine, right, you're stripped of your identity, you see the smoke from the crematorium, you know people are being killed.
There's this chilling part where he talks about seeing a friend sent to the left towards the smoke and realizing what that meant. That's when the reality sinks in.
It's like fight or flight, but amplified 1,000 times. Pure adrenaline, trying to deal with this overwhelming threat.
But you can't stay in that state of shock forever, can you?
Right. Eventually, it kind of numbs you. Frankl calls it apathy.
So it's in a way, apathy becomes a way to survive.
It is. You simply can't maintain that level of fear and panic all the time, so you shut down emotionally just to get through the day.
Frankl describes how everything becomes about basic survival, like the constant hunger, the fight for scraps of food, having to look healthy so you don't get sent to the gas chamber.
It's a textbook Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When survival is on the line, those basic needs, safety, food, water, they become everything. Higher needs, like love, belonging, even meaning, they fade into the background.
You have to wonder, how could anyone find meaning in a place designed to strip you of your humanity?
And that's a fascinating part. Frankl saw it happen, but there's another stage before we get to that, a really disturbing one called depersonalization.
This is the part where it gets really tough to hear, right? The Nazis were deliberately dehumanizing these prisoners, reducing them to numbers, taking away their names and identities. They were chipping away at their humanity.
Frankl has this story about seeing a dead body being dragged across the floor, and he felt nothing at first. Then the horror hit him, not at the corpse, but at his own lack of reaction. It shows just how damaging this prolonged trauma can be.
It makes you think, how would I react in that kind of situation? What would I be willing to do to survive? What values would I hold on to?
Tough questions. But they highlight how resilient we can be, and also how fragile.
But Frankl's book isn't all darkness. He also saw moments of hope, even joy, in the midst of all that suffering.
That's the amazing part. In spite of the brutality, those prisoners found ways to cling to hope.
Like Frankl himself, he talks about finding solace in the mental image of his wife, even though he had no idea if she was even alive. It shows the power of love, doesn't it? To transcend even these horrific circumstances.
And there's also humor, believe it or not. They'd make jokes, tell stories, imagine life after liberation. That gallows humor, however dark it, was an escape from the reality of the camps.
So we've got this terrible picture of life in the camps, this descent into dehumanization, but at the same time you have these flickers of hope, this insistence on inner freedom. And this is where Frankl starts building his theory of logotherapy. Maybe we should pause here, just let all of this sink in.
Good idea. What Frankl describes, it's intense.
We've covered a lot of the Holocaust, the psychological effects of trauma, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Let's take a moment to process it all before we dive into logotherapy itself.
Right. We'll see how Frankl used these experiences to develop a whole philosophy for finding meaning, even in the face of, unthinkable hardship. Okay, so, ready for something a bit different. We've talked about the grim reality of the camps, but now let's look at how Frankl turned that experience into something, well, hopeful.
Yeah, so we're moving from barbed wire and guard towers to, the world of ideas.
Exactly. Frankl didn't want to just, describe the horrors. He wanted to understand why some prisoners found a way to survive mentally when others, well, they didn't. That's where logotherapy comes in.
You mentioned it before, but remind me, what is logotherapy exactly?
It's a type of psychotherapy, but it revolves around this idea that our main driving force is the need to find meaning in life. Frankl called it the will to meaning.
So it's not just about pleasure, like Freud said, or power, like Adler. It's about meaning.
Right. And that was pretty radical, even back then. He argued that when we lose our sense of meaning, we fall into what he called an existential vacuum.
Existential vacuum. That sounds heavy. What does that actually feel like?
It's that emptiness, the feeling that nothing really matters. It can lead to boredom, apathy, even like total despair.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, even if they haven't been through something as awful as a concentration camp.
Oh, absolutely. Frankl thought this existential vacuum was becoming more and more common in modern society. He saw it as a result of, people focusing too much on material stuff,
Yeah.
instant gratification, and just chasing pleasure.
So even if we have all our basic needs met, a comfortable life, we can still feel this lack of meaning.
Exactly. Now, the question is, how do we fight it? Frankl laid out 3 main ways we can discover meaning in life.
Okay, lay it on us. The roadmap to meaning, right?
The first one is through creating something, doing something meaningful. This could be anything, a fulfilling job, raising kids, volunteering, even just learning a new skill.
So it's about contributing, making a difference, no matter how big or small. What about the second one?
The second is about experiencing something or connecting with someone, like appreciating nature, art, feeling the power of love, or having a conversation that really opens up your mind.
It's about those moments of awe, connection, really engaging with life.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the third way, this one's maybe the hardest, and it's tied directly to what Frankl went through in the camps. It's about finding meaning in how we deal with suffering, the stuff we can't avoid.
Okay, now that's interesting. How can you find meaning in suffering?
It's not about, wanting to suffer or thinking it's a good thing. It's about recognizing that suffering is just a part of life. And when it happens, we have a choice in how we react to it.
So even in the worst times, there's a chance for growth, for finding meaning.
That's what Frankl saw in the camps. He saw people who, even while going through unimaginable horror, they chose to act with courage, compassion, even love. Their suffering, it became a testament to the human spirit.
Wow, that's powerful. But how do you actually do that? Did Frankl give any practical advice?
He did. One technique he developed is called paradoxical intention.
Paradoxical intention. Yeah, that sounds a bit complicated.
It's a little counterintuitive. The idea is that sometimes to get over fear or anxiety, the best thing to do is to, face it directly, even embrace it.
So instead of running away from what scares us, we run towards it.
In a sense, yeah. Imagine you're terrified of public speaking. With paradoxical intention, you might be encouraged to purposely try to mess up during your speech.
Wait, really? Wouldn't that make the anxiety worse?
It seems like it would, right? But by doing the thing you fear on purpose, you kind of break the cycle. You take away its power.
There's almost a, humorous side to it. You're making fun of your own fear.
Right. There's a story about how Frankl used this with another prisoner, a scientist who was devastated because he'd developed writer's cramp. Frankl told him to try to write as badly as he could.
And did it work?
It did. By trying to write badly, the pressure was off. He wasn't afraid of the cramp anymore, and his writing actually got better.
So logotherapy isn't just some abstract philosophy. It has these real-world tools for dealing with problems.
Absolutely. And I think it's even more relevant today, with so many people feeling stressed, anxious, and like their lives have no meaning.
Yeah, we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us we need to be successful, happy, rich. It's easy to forget what actually matters.
Logotherapy reminds us that meaning isn't something we just find out there, it's something we create. It's in our actions, our relationships, how we face challenges. It's about, taking responsibility for our own lives and finding meaning, even when things are tough.
So just to recap, we've got these 3 ways to find meaning: work and deeds, experiences and encounters, and how we deal with suffering. And we have tools like paradoxical intention to help us.
Right. And it's not about finding this one big purpose, meaning it can be in the small things, the everyday moments. It's about being present, engaged, and making choices that reflect our values.
This has been really insightful. But you mentioned earlier that Frankl had even more, let's say radical ideas about meaning, something about a super meaning. Maybe that's something we can unpack in the next part.
Definitely. That's where things get really interesting. Frankl takes us beyond our own personal search for meaning and asks if there's a bigger meaning to life itself.
All right, so we've talked about the horrors Frankl faced and how those experiences led to his theory of logotherapy. We've also looked at those 3 ways to find meaning and even that paradoxical intention thing. But now I got to hear more about this super meaning idea you brought up. What was Frankl getting at there?
Well, this is where Frankl goes beyond just us looking for meaning in our own lives and asks, is there a meaning to life itself? Like a meaning that's bigger than us, bigger than what we can even understand.
So not just me finding my own meaning, but like a universal meaning, some kind of bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly. He calls it a super meaning, a meaning that's out there regardless of what we think or experience, a meaning that we might not ever be able to fully grasp.
I can see how he might have come to that idea, especially after what he went through. Even in the camps, with all that suffering, he still saw those glimmers of hope, resilience, love. It's like something else was going on, something that made the whole situation, well, not meaningless.
Right. And Frankl, he's not saying he has all the answers. He admits this super meaning, it might always be a mystery, but just thinking about it, trying to live a meaningful life, that can change everything.
It's almost like a kind of faith, right? Not necessarily religious, but believing in something bigger than ourselves, even if we can't explain it.
Yeah, I see the connection. But whatever you believe, Frankl's idea of super meaning makes you look at things differently. Like, what if our lives are part of something much bigger, something we can only see a tiny bit of?
It's kind of humbling, isn't it? Makes you realize that all our struggles, all the good stuff, all of it, is connected somehow.
It shows we're not alone. And even the small things we do, they can have an impact, be part of this bigger meaning, even if we never see it.
Okay, so if we can't really grasp the super meaning, what's a takeaway for us? How do we actually use this idea?
Well, I think it teaches us to be humble, reminds us that we don't know everything, and it's okay to be open to the mystery of it all. And it encourages us to live with a sense of purpose, even if we don't have all the pieces.
Like we're all in this play, but we don't know the whole script. But we should still try to play our part the best we can.
Exactly. And maybe by trying to live meaningfully, making choices based on what we believe in, we're contributing to that super meaning, even if we don't see how.
So to you listening, what do you think? We've gone from those awful experiences in the camps to this idea of logotherapy and now this super meaning thing. What stuck with you? What makes sense to you in your own search for meaning?
I hope this deep dive gave you some things to think about, maybe even some tools you can use to find meaning in your own life. Remember, it's a journey. And even when things are rough and uncertain, there's always hope. There's always a chance to find purpose and connect with something bigger.
We talked about Frankl's 3 ways of finding meaning, but, I think it often comes from a mix of all 3. Creating, experiencing, choosing how we react. It's about finding meaning in our work, our relationships, the things we're passionate about, and how we face the hard stuff.
And don't forget about paradoxical intention. Might sound strange, but it can really help you get over fear and anxiety.
For sure. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep looking for meaning in everything you do. You never know what you might find.
You're not alone in this. Frankl's message of hope, it still inspires people all over the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into man's search for meaning. It's been awesome exploring these ideas with you. Until next time, keep on diving.